Hello, welcome to my channel. My name is Shanta, and we're going to be starting a new kind of series on this channel. And what I wanted to do with my channel is tell stories that may have faded away from memory or stories that you may have never heard of. And while I tell you these stories, I'm going to be making candles. And what I hope to accomplish with this channel is to bring a resurgence for those who have not received justice in their stories, or at least just give you an insight into who these real people were. So without further ado, let's get started. First, I'm going to put on my gloves because candle making can be very messy. And today I'm going to tell you the story of Phylicia Barnes. The reason why I chose her story to be the inaugural story of this channel is because it hits very, very close to home to me because it actually happened in my hometown of Baltimore. And when you take a look into Phylicia's story, it's just very, very unfortunate that this happened to her, and her family did not deserve to have to go through this with someone like Phylicia, and you'll see why as I tell her story. So while we're waiting for the candles to solidify, I can begin Phylicia's story. Phylicia Simone Barnes was born on January 12, 1994, to her mother Janice Salas Mustafa, and her father's name is Russell Barnes. She was from Monroe, North Carolina, and at an early age, Phylicia was just a brilliant child. She was super intelligent. She excelled academically, even to the point where she was afforded the opportunity to skip the third grade at her elementary school, Walter Bickett Elementary. When she graduated elementary school, when she got to middle school, she just excelled even further, to the point where in the seventh grade, she received an early acceptance into a prestigious, highly rated charter school in Monroe, North Carolina, called Union Academy. Unfortunately, her father, Russell Barnes, was not involved in her upbringing, but she was raised by her mother, Janice Salas Mustafa, and her stepfather, Rahim Mustafa. As Phylicia developed into a teenager, she, of course, did the typical teenager things. She liked to talk on the phone with her friends. She liked to go to the movies. She liked to shop. And she was never a troublemaker. So Phylicia was just an exceptional child. She is every parent's dream. Of course, even though she liked to do the typical teenager things of hanging out with her friends, as most of us who were teenagers at one point in time loved to do, her academics never wavered. She was an honor student at Union Academy, and she even participated in their creative arts program doing theater. Also in high school, she took college prep courses, which helped her be on track to actually graduate high school a year early. As I mentioned a little bit earlier, Russell Barnes, Phylicia's father, was not really involved in her upbringing. However, Janice had actually encouraged Phylicia to get in contact with some of her half siblings so that way she could try to connect with her father, Russell. So, sometime around the year of 2009, Phylicia was searching on Facebook, and she actually came across her half siblings, two sisters, Kelly and Dina, and a brother named Brian. Dina claimed as soon as Phylicia reached out to her, there was an immediate bond. After the initial conversation between Dina and Phylicia, the sisters kept regular communication. And eventually, this led to Phylicia and Russell connecting. Once she connected with Russell, she started making trips to visit her other side of the family in Baltimore, Maryland. She started making these trips, of course, to get to know her other side of the family more and to connect deeper with her other side of the family. Back home in Monroe, Phylicia started to prepare for graduation. And of course, when you're a senior in high school, you start thinking about college and you start talking about college. Well, Phylicia had started to apply to colleges, and she had already been accepted into a few of them. She had ultimately decided on Towson University, which is located in Towson, Maryland. But for those who are native to Baltimore or know the Baltimore area, that's in Baltimore County, where she wanted to major in psychology and early childhood education. Janice, while very, very proud of her daughter, she was a little reluctant to send Phylicia to college out of state, simply because she felt that her baby, Phylicia, wasn't ready, and she was very protective of her, which is understandable. So Phylicia visited Baltimore a handful of times, And every time she visited Baltimore, she stayed with Dina, her sister. And despite the 12-year age gap, they were super, super close. In January of 2010, Phylicia had made one of her scheduled visits to Baltimore. Dina at the time was dating a man named Michael Johnson, who was also living with her at this time. And so whenever Phylicia visited, Michael, of course, was always there. So, of course, Dina being an adult, her house was kind of like a party house. And she did adult activities, of course, like drinking, smoking, all of the things that, some adults do. So, unfortunately, Phylicia was introduced to underage drinking. One day during these visits, Dina claimed that she witnessed an inappropriate interaction between Michael and Phylicia. On June 13th, 2010, Phylicia, Dina, Michael's younger brother or cousin, I've seen some reports call him his brother and some other reports call him the cousin. They were all drinking and smoking, and one of them, Dina's not sure who, suggested that they go streaking in the nearby high school's field. At one point, Dina claimed to be uncomfortable with seeing Phylicia and Michael in a bathroom where Michael was wiping something off of Phylicia leg, and then she claimed that she witnessed him attempting to touch her vagina, at which point Phylicia playfully kind of swatted his hand away and laughed it off. Now, Dina says that she confronted Michael about this interaction and he denied all of the allegations that she was bringing towards him. However, Dina said that after this incident, Dina says that their relationship changed and that she never had sexual relations with him again.
Hey, just popping in and saying that I forgot to mention that Dina never brought this incident up to Russell nor Janice for fear that Phylicia would not be able to come and stay with her again the next time she visited.
So after that night of the streaking and the incident that Dina says that she saw between Phylicia and Michael, Michael and Phylicia actually started texting, and in the subsequent months since that incident had happened, hundreds of text messages had been sent between the two of them. Michael even referring to Phylicia as Little Sis. Fast forward to December of 2010, Phylicia visited Baltimore again, and of course, per usual, she stayed with Dina. However, this time, this visit was supposed to be a little bit different because Michael was supposed to be moving out, as Dina claimed that their relationship was over at this time. So Phylicia visited around the Christmas holiday, and on December 28th, 2010, instead of going to work with Dina or Kelly, their other sister, like she would usually do, per some reports, Phylicia actually stayed home. However, Phylicia wasn't home alone because apparently Michael's younger brother or cousin, the one who was there for the streaking incident back in June of 2010, was also there because he had also spent the night. Dina claimed that when she was getting ready for work and had left out for work, that Phylicia was actually sleeping still when she left for work. Later that day, Kelly and Phylicia actually had plans. Later that evening, they were supposed to go run a couple of errands and then go get their hair done. And when Kelly called Phylicia to make sure that these plans were still a go, she says that she did not receive an answer from Phylicia with the few times that she tried to call her. So after not getting any response from Phylicia, Kelly ended up calling Dina to see if Dina maybe have heard from Phylicia or knew what was going on as to why Phylicia wasn't answering Kelly's call. However, when Kelly inquired about Phylicia, Dina told her that Phylicia was still sleeping at this time, according to what Michael had told her earlier that day, because Michael had came by the house to pick up the younger brother slash cousin to take him to Michael's grandmother's house. However, it was never clear on what time this supposedly was. No one had went to the house after this, not Kelly, not Dina, or anyone else for that matter, to see if Phylicia was indeed still asleep at Dina's home, like Dina told Kelly what Michael told her. And so throughout the day, Dina and Kelly still attempted to call Phylicia with no success. And later on that day, Michael had sent a text to Dina, a long text message actually, asking and suggesting that they actually stay together. A little bit after that text, Michael had ended up calling Dina and saying that he wasn't going into work that day, which is a little weird because Michael usually works from 3 p.m. to 11 p.m. And at this time, still no one had spoken to Phylicia herself, even when she inquired about it with Michael on the phone. Around 5 p.m., Michael texted Dina that he saw Phylicia out and about. And he knew this because he had actually returned to the apartment to do some laundry and to clear out the rest of his belongings, and that is how he saw her. However, he did not specifically state where he saw Phylicia out and about. So, about an hour later, around 6 p.m., Dina arrived home from work. And when she arrived home, she stated that the door was unlocked and that the music was blasting loud. However, no sign of Phylicia in the home, or anyone in the home for that matter. Understandably, feeling very unsettled by what she had just arrived home to, Dina called Kelly and Brian, and she called them to see if they had heard from Phylicia. But of course, Kelly hadn't still at this time, and Brian had not heard from Phylicia either. Very worried, Dina called Michael because, per his text messages that he sent her earlier, he was the last one to see Phylicia. However, he did not answer the phone, instead sending her a text message saying he was looking for a charger because his phone was about to die. So after this, Dina attempted again to try to call Phylicia. However, Phylicia did not answer the phone yet again, worried Dina even further. So while this is all going on in Baltimore, down in North Carolina, Janice has no idea what's going on at this time. She has no idea that no one knows Phylicia's whereabouts, and she's just carrying on with her day as if it's any other day. However, this day was very weird for Janice. She said that she just had a horrible gut feeling all day long and just couldn't explain it. She felt that something was just terribly, terribly wrong. And so she tried to call Phylicia just to check on her, as any parent would do, and she did not receive an answer. So when Janice couldn't reach Phylicia after a few times of calling her, Janice ended up calling Dina. This was around 8 or 9 p.m. when Janice finally called Dina. And that's when Dina had to reveal the worst news any parent never wants to hear when it comes to their child, that Phylicia was missing. Janice is understandably shocked and upset at the news that Dina just told her. Unfortunately for Janice, this was only the beginning of every parent's worst nightmare. The dark secrets and horrible truths that were about to be revealed is something almost out of a horror film. So after Dina got off the phone with Janice, Michael actually ended up coming back to the apartment. And they all tried to put their heads together to figure out where in the world Phylicia could be. Because Phylicia is not from Baltimore and she's 16. She really doesn't know anyone in Baltimore outside of her family. So where could Phylicia have gone? No one has heard from her. They just need answers and need to know that she's safe. The police were eventually contacted and Phylicia was finally reported as a missing teen. But the police, of course, believed that she was just a runaway. The Barnes family was very upset at this assumption because it's like, how can Phylicia be a runaway? As I stated before, she's not from Baltimore. She doesn't know the area very well. She's 16, and outside of her family, she really knows no one in Baltimore. So it's not even in her nature to run away. So Janice wasted no time coming up to Baltimore, as she should. And on December 30th, she arrived to town to search for her baby. On December 31st, 2010, Janice was interviewed by CBS Baltimore, and in this interview, she pleaded for the safe return of Phylicia. This was her first public appearance about the disappearance of her daughter. In the initial investigation into Phylicia's disappearance, the police did not suspect foul play. On January 3rd, 2011, the police ended up changing their story, and now the search for Phylicia was being handled by the Baltimore Homicide Unit. Why was it being investigated by the Homicide Unit? The police just didn't say. It was very alarming to the investigators because Phylicia's cell phone was not pinging off of any towers, so that kind of eliminated the potential for her to have been kidnapped. Also, her credit cards were not being used, so of course that also raises red flags for investigators, and they were monitoring her social media pages, which any teenager back in 2010 and 2011, that's pretty much all we did with our free time. She was not making any posts or any updates, so that also raised very, very big flags. The very next day, on January 4th, 2011, the FBI ended up joining the search for Phylicia, but field searches yielded no results in finding her. According to the Baltimore Police Department, or BPD, they interviewed several witnesses and they performed search and seizure warrants on those who had contact with Phylicia during her visit to Baltimore. During the investigation, it was revealed that Phylicia was giving marijuana and alcohol, which made Janice absolutely livid. As the days turned into weeks, the search for Phylicia intensified. During the initial investigation into Phylicia's disappearance, she had not received a lot of traction regarding her disappearance, possibly costing valuable time to find Phylicia. However, as the days turned into weeks with no results or no updates about Phylicia, the search intensified. Sewers were checked, dumpsters were checked, cadaver dogs were used, large volunteer groups even aided in the searches. However, all of these attempts were unsuccessful in finding Phylicia. On January 14th of 2011, then Maryland Representative Elijah Cummings and Representative for North Carolina Barry Kissel issued joint statements pleading for Phylicia's safe return. And of course, after some weeks had passed, Phylicia's disappearance was finally gaining some local news traction. It was frustrating at first because when she was first reported missing, no one really reported on her story. A $25,000 reward was also offered in any answers or the finding of Phylicia, but this also unfortunately yielded no results in finding Phylicia. After a few months, on April 21st, 2011, the search for Phylicia came to an end. Two workers at the bottom of the Conowingo Dam near the Susquehanna River discovered two bodies. One of the bodies was male and the other body was female. The female body, using dental records, was identified as Phylicia Simone Barnes. The second body was identified as Daryl Harper, whose wife had reported him missing earlier that month. Phylicia was found nude and there were no easily visible external injuries to her body, so the cause of death was not immediately known. So her body was sent off to the Office of the Chief Medical Examiner in Baltimore for autopsy. So now the police had to investigate her death as a homicide. A couple of months later, in July of 2011, the local media obtained information that the police had obtained warrants to search Phylicia's social media accounts as well as her email account. Later that year, in December of 2011, which made a year after Phylicia's disappearance, the police claimed that they were making progress in the case. And a few months later, in April of 2012, so about a year after Phylicia's body was discovered, the police announced that they had made an arrest, and they arrested Dina's ex-boyfriend, Michael Johnson. The indictment was sealed, so unfortunately at that time, it was not immediately known what evidence the police had to make the arrest. However, a little bit of time after the indictment, prosecutors revealed just a little bit more of what evidence they had against Michael, which included the text messages between himself and Phylicia. It was found that he and Phylicia exchanged hundreds of text messages at one point in time. He was also seen on security cam footage purchasing a 35-gallon tote from a local store on the day Phylicia disappeared. And that same day, witnesses told investigators that they actually saw Michael sweating profusely and struggling to move this tote out of Dina's apartment. Also, in the investigation into Michael, they intercepted his phone call. So essentially that means they tapped his phone. And he was recorded saying, quote, "I feel like ish is going to hit the fan. I feel like I should pack up and leave, maybe leave the country. I should go to Brazil. If I start a new life, would they be able to arrest me?" End quote. Most of the evidence actually brought against Michael was circumstantial. However, prosecutors felt that this circumstantial case was strong enough to take him to trial, and so they did. In January 2013, Michael Johnson's trial began. Several witnesses had testified, including Dina and Russell Barnes. During this trial, the jury was shown very disturbing pieces of evidence, And this piece of evidence was an alleged sex tape that included Phylicia, Dina, Michael, and Michael's brother slash cousin that we mentioned earlier. I wasn't able to find his name. And it appears to be the tape from that June night back in 2010, which shows all of them in compromising positions, nude. The prosecution's story was that Michael was obsessed with Phylicia, and their belief was that he raped Phylicia, strangled her, threw her body, put her body into the 35-gallon tote, and disposed of her body in the water where it surfaced in the Conowingo Dam. The defense, however, refuted the claim that Michael was obsessed with Phylicia, saying that the texts between them were innocent and friendly. He called her little sis. So how could he be obsessed with someone he called his little sis? Though the physical evidence lacked in the case, the prosecution did their best presenting their case with the circumstantial evidence that they had on Michael. One of the witnesses for the prosecution, a man named James McCrae, testified that Michael had called him and called him over to the apartment saying that he needed help with something. And when he arrived to the apartment, he claimed that Michael showed him Phylicia's deceased body. And that testimony, along with the other testimony and the circumstantial evidence in the case, helped the jury convict Michael of murder in the second degree of Phylicia Barnes in February of 2013, for his sentencing to be scheduled for the following month in March of 2013. In March of 2013, at Michael Johnson's sentencing, the defense filed a motion for a new trial. The defense claimed that the prosecution withheld information that James McCrae was a petty thief. They also claimed that he was also known as a jailhouse snitch who didn't know Michael Johnson from Michael Jordan. The judge actually agreed with the defense, and a new trial was granted to Michael Johnson. However, he stayed in jail until that new trial date. The second trial began in December of 2014, and he could only be brought up on the charges of second-degree murder, as he was already found not guilty for first-degree murder in the first trial. The prosecution pretty much laid out the same exact case, saying that Michael was obsessed with Phylicia and how he did the crime. However, before the defense could present their case, the judge on the matter declared a mistrial. The judge declared a mistrial because the judge stated that the prosecution had showed evidence to the jury that was supposed to be withheld. The judge did not believe that this was done intentionally. However, because the jury had already maintained it, a mistrial had to be declared. The prosecution wanted to do a third trial, but Michael did not want a third trial. So he filed an appeal with the U.S. Supreme Court to have the third trial blocked. However, the Supreme Court denied this motion. So in March of 2018, the third trial of Michael Johnson began. Again, the prosecution argued that Michael was obsessed with Phylicia and how he committed the crime. The defense stated that there was not enough evidence to convict, or that there was enough evidence to prove that Phylicia was even murdered. So after 4 weeks of testimony, the judge presiding over the matter, because Michael Johnson opted out for a jury trial and only wanted to do a bench trial, which means that it's just you, the prosecution, and the judge decides if you're guilty or innocent. After 4 weeks of testimony, the judge decided to drop all of the charges against Michael Johnson for the second-degree murder of Phylicia Barnes. The judge on the matter cited that the prosecution failed to prove their case and that Michael Johnson was the one that committed the murder of Phylicia Barnes. As of this video, Phylicia Barnes' case still remains an unsolved murder case. So that'll do it, unfortunately, for the story of Phylicia Barnes. I just want to give a little bit of my thoughts on this case. As like I said, this case really hits home for me as it happened in my hometown. I feel like Phylicia's innocence was taken advantage of, and that the Barnes family didn't really care, or more specifically Dina didn't really care for Phylicia like she claims. I just feel like Janice did nothing wrong. I think that it was very commendable for Janice to encourage Phylicia to reach out to her other side of the family so that way she knew who they were. And I just feel like they just 100% was careless in the handling of such a child. There are reports of her brother on her mother's side that she lit up a room whenever she walked into it. She was a happy, bubbly teenager, and everyone wanted to be around her. So it seems like she had such a great aura and a bright light that was dimmed way too early. I feel like the people who are responsible for Phylicia's death are still walking around unjustly and they deserve to be in jail. I feel like Dina knows more than she's been saying because her story never sounded right from day one to me when researching Phylicia Barnes' case some more. And Michael's story, of course, never made sense to me. I feel like I haven't seen any reports of the investigators even talking to the brother slash cousin that had been around. And if they did talk to him, why wasn't his statements and everything, why wasn't his statements ever made public? Why was Michael's story the only story that the investigators, that Dino went by, and it seems like investigators went by? There should have been more pressure added because there could have been ample time given to the people that did this to Phylicia to dispose of her, do whatever they did with her, and then dispose of her body in such a cruel, callous way. I feel like the investigators, per usual, dropped the ball, and this is why Phylicia unfortunately has no justice, even to this day. She had her whole life ahead of her. She never got to attend the college that she wanted to attend. She never got to go into the career field that she wanted to do, which I'm sure she would have been amazing at. And for the Barnes family to just not have any answers for Janice is just unacceptable. The prosecution dropped the ball with presenting their case. They should have made sure it was as airtight as it could be. And the whole James McCrae debacle is just inexcusable to me. It was horribly, horribly handled by the prosecution. Let me know your thoughts on Phylicia's story. I am way more interested to hear what you have to say, but that's it for this one. I will be back with another video. That's all for today. Bye.